The academy was buzzing with its usual weekday routine, but all eyes suddenly turned to one aisle. A young black woman, no more than 24, was surrounded by two uniformed officers, their voices sharp and commanding. Shelves rattled as one cop shoved her against the display, accusing her of theft without a shred of evidence. Customers whispered, some pulling out phones to record. To the crowd, it looked like another humiliating arrest unfolding in real time. But what no one knew, not the officers, not the onlookers, was that this woman carried a secret that would soon flip the entire narrative upside down. Her name was Sophia Matthews. At first glance, she blended into the academy crowd. Dark tactical pants, a plain training hoodie, and boots that had seen better days. She wasn't flashy, didn't demand attention, and on that afternoon, she had only come into the academy for something simple, a quick training session and a few hours of practice drills. Yet the way the officers zeroed in on her, you would think she had walked in carrying a neon sign above her head. Sophia had grown accustomed to the stares, the suspicious glances, the academy instructors who followed her around as though her very presence spelled trouble. Yet each time, she forced herself to stay calm, to let it roll off her back, but this time felt different. This time the hostility wasn't subtle, it was loud, public, and humiliating. The officers, responding to a supposed shoplifting call, had barely entered the academy before targeting her. No questions asked, no chance to explain, just accusations hurled in front of strangers. A mother covered her child's eyes. A fellow recruit froze mid-drill, lips parted in shock. Sophia's heart pounded, not from guilt, but from anger. Still, she stayed silent, her eyes steady, her breathing controlled. Inside, though, she wrestled with a storm. She knew something the officers didn't. Under that plain hoodie and quiet demeanor, she carried an identity that could turn the situation on its head. But revealing it too soon would rob her of a truth she wanted these officers to face. The truth of how they treated someone they assumed had no power. The tension built in the room and the recruits leaned closer, waiting to see if this would be yet another story of humiliation, or the moment everything changed. The officers tightened their grip, one yanking Sophia's arms behind her back while the other patted down her pockets. Her training items, practice gloves and water bottle, fell to the floor, rolling across the tiles as though mocking the absurdity of the situation. "Caught red-handed," one officer muttered loudly enough for the entire academy to hear. The other smirked, tugging Sophia toward the training room, as if parading her for the crowd. The whispers swelled. Some recruits shook their heads in quiet disapproval, while others muttered under their breath, their biases confirmed by the sight before them. A new recruit raised his phone higher, recording every second with wide-eyed fascination. This was entertainment to some, tragedy to others. To Sophia, it was both familiar and infuriating. She could feel the weight of dozens of stares pressing down on her, but she refused to drop her gaze. Every time these moments happened on academy grounds, in police departments, in classrooms, she remembered the lessons drilled into her since childhood. Keep calm, don't resist, live to fight another day. But beneath her stillness now, there was something brewing, a steady fire waiting for the right spark. The officers were careless in their certainty. They hadn't checked her training records. They hadn't even looked into her background. They assumed, and in their arrogance, they acted as judge, jury, and executioner in front of an entire audience. To them, she was just another faceless recruit who would be hauled off, paper trails created, case forgotten. But Sophia was no ordinary recruit. By day, yes, she blended in like anyone else, but her reality was far from ordinary. She was an off-duty police captain's daughter, someone who had earned the respect of colleagues across the department, someone who had led operations, who carried authority that reached far beyond these officers. Yet she kept that truth close, choosing patience over fury. What mattered most wasn't proving her innocence. She had nothing to hide. What mattered was revealing the injustice at its rawest, showing these officers for exactly what they were when they thought no one was watching. As the crowd's murmurs grew louder, the academy's deputy chief rushed over, wringing his hands nervously. "Officers, are you sure?" he began, but one sharp glare from the officers silenced him. The power dynamic was clear. Uniforms commanded obedience, no questions asked. The deputy chief stepped back, torn between protecting the academy and witnessing an unfolding injustice he felt powerless to stop. Sophia's pulse steadied. Every second the officers mistreated her was another second the cameras and witnesses documented the truth. Every shove, every sneer, every baseless accusation layered more weight onto the scales of justice that would eventually tip in her favor. Still, the humiliation burned, kneeling on the cold tile as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Sophia stared at the ground, jaw tight. She could hear the officers laughing under their breath, congratulating themselves for nipping trouble in the bud. They had no idea the storm they had just invited into their lives. And then, as they hauled her toward the exit, the moment of reckoning began to unfold. The officers pushed Sophia through the automatic doors, the afternoon sun spilling across the parking lot. Phones followed, recording every step as if the world already knew this scene would not end quietly. Sophia felt the cuffs dig into her wrists, but she kept her head high. The humiliation was undeniable, yet beneath it, a calm resolve carried her forward. One officer pulled open the squad car door, while the other shoved Sophia against the hood. "Another recruit off the streets," he sneered, patting himself on the back with arrogance thick enough to taste. Laughter followed, sharp and ugly. The crowd outside the academy shifted, uneasy. Yet no one intervened. They had seen this story too many times before. But Sophia knew this wasn't going to end like the others. With deliberate calm, she turned her head toward the officer holding her arm, and she said, "Check my back pocket." She said it quietly, but with authority that made the words land heavier than expected. The officer scoffed, ready to dismiss her, but something in Sophia's tone made him pause. Reluctantly, the officer reached into Sophia's pocket and froze. His fingers brushed against something cold, solid, unmistakable. Pulling it out, his smug expression collapsed. In his hand gleamed a badge, not a novelty, not a fake, an official emblem of rank and power. The crowd gasped, phones trembling as they zoomed in to capture the moment. The second officer's face drained of color, his arrogance dissolving into panic. The badge caught the sunlight, commanding attention like a beacon. "Now tell me again?" She locked eyes with them, her voice steady, cutting through the murmurs like a blade.
"What exactly did I steal?" Silence fell. The crowd, once spectators to a humiliation, now shifted in energy. Gasps turned to whispers of awe, the narrative flipping in an instant. The same officers who had dragged her in disgrace now stood exposed, their authority shattered by the very proof of Sophia's real power. The balance of power had shifted completely, and the officers knew it. Their mistake wasn't just arrogance, it was underestimating a recruit whose badge carried more weight than theirs ever could. The parking lot was still, the kind of silence that only follows a storm. The badge in the officer's trembling hand gleamed like undeniable truth, and no one could look away. For the first time since this humiliating spectacle began, the control shifted. Sophia, once treated like a criminal, now stood as the embodiment of authority, strength, and justice. The officer stammered, scrambling for excuses. Miscommunication, following protocol, just doing our job. But their words rang hollow. The crowd had seen everything. They had heard the mocking laughter, witnessed the rough treatment, and now they watched two men shrink beneath the weight of their own prejudice. Sophia didn't need to raise her voice. Her composure was louder than any outburst could have been. She retrieved the badge from the officer's hand, holding it firmly, the symbol of her rank and sacrifice. Years of service, leadership, and courage rested in that badge, things the officers could never fake. Turning to the crowd, Sophia let the moment hang heavy. "This," she said quietly, lifting the badge, "isn't just mine. It represents the truth you've all seen today.
that judgment without facts, fueled by prejudice, will always backfire. Her words pierced through the air, lingering even as the murmur swelled again,